In this section, we're going to find a file within a directory or subdirectory. Now, I think all the concepts and skills in this course are important, but the reality is some things you'll use more often than others. For example, finding your IP address is important, but you won't use that on a day-to-day basis. Whereas the sections here, like finding a file, finding a word within a file, those things are something you might use on a day-to-day basis. So just wanted to make that point here so that you know kind of what to tune into a little bit more versus other topics that again are good for awareness. You'll more than likely need to do some of those other skills at some point in time, but these are things that you'll use more frequently. So let's go ahead and take a look at how you find a file within a directory, and we'll use the Windows GUI to start. Now when you open up File Explorer and you click on a directory such as temp, you'll see in the upper right hand corner it says search temp. So what it's going to do here is if we look for files, it's going to search in the temp directory on down, any subdirectories below it. So if we look for something like star.txt, so we're looking for all our text files, we can see what's returned is anything that ends in .txt, and it shows us the directory we're in. So it's either ctemp or a subdirectory such as ctemp dir2. Now we can also search on the command line, and here we can, so we're in the temp directory right now. So when we do a dir and then provide a file name that we want to search for, it's going to search just in the temp directory. And here it shows the two files we have. If we use a /s, then it will also include the subdirectories. Again, it's not going to search up, but it will search the current directory, current working directory, and the subdirectories below it. So here we see that it finds like ctemp, ctemp dir2, and here's all the files that end in .txt. Okay, now let's take a look at the Linux side, and we'll use the Ubuntu virtual machine for that. So in Ubuntu, and I'll make this a little bit bigger in a second, there's a couple commands you can use, either the find or the locate. Now locate is not available in all Linux distributions, so it may or may not work, but find should. So one of the ways you can look for files is to type in find the top level directory you want to start searching from, and then -name, and then you can provide a file name. And if I hit return here, one of the things you'll notice is some of the directories I don't have permission to search, and so it will tell me permission denied. But here at the bottom it does show where I found a file that matching the criteria I provided. You could also use the GUI in Ubuntu to search for files or to find files in directories and subdirectories, but I think this shows you enough to give you a comfort level to be able to go and find files on your own now. The next skill to be familiar with is finding a word within a file. So the best way to do this is to open up the application that is associated with the file. In this case, we have a text file, and we can use Notepad to open it. So I'm going to right click on the file and then choose Open With and then Notepad. And when you're in an application, there's usually a couple ways to do that. You can either go up into the menu and find something like Edit, Find. It might say Edit Search. Either way, you'll come up with this dialog box, and you can type in your criteria here. And of course, it will find whatever you type in here. Now this is a very simple file, but if you had a very large file, this would come in very handy. An alternative way of doing it is Control F. So if you use the keys, you can do a Control F, and it'll bring that find box up right away, so you don't have to navigate through the menu. So that's just a shortcut to be aware of. Okay, now if it's a text file, you can also use the command line, but if it's something like a spreadsheet, a word processor, a PowerPoint type application where you have slideshows, you're going to have to open up the file within that application. But if it's a text file, you can use the command line, and we've seen this a couple times already. So if for that file, file1.txt, we can use the more command to look at the contents of the file and then find whatever criteria we're looking for. So in this case, find second. We can also do this in PowerShell. So in PowerShell, we type the contents of the file and we pipe that output to find string, and here we see it again. So several ways to find words within a file, and for the Linux part, I'm not going to go over that because it's very, very similar. Same types of things. You can use Control F in the Linux GUI. You can use more, and the only difference between Linux would be using the grep command instead of find. So very, very similar functionality, and so that's another skill that you'll more than likely use quite often. This is the third skill that concerns finding something. So this is where we're going to find a word within a command's output, and we've been doing this quite a bit already, so it shouldn't be anything new. So I'm just going to run through a couple examples here. So what that means is we want to find a word in a command's output. So here's the command, and then we want to find the word wireless in this case. So what we did is we ran the command, we redirected or piped the output to a new command called find string, and then our criteria that we're looking for is wireless. So if we run that, it's going to return any line from that getNet adapter command that had the term wireless in it. Again, we've done this before, so this isn't anything too new. We can do that with the command line. We can also do this in Linux, but I'm going to defer on that for the time being, and I'll explain why in a second. But here is a regular command line. Again, you see the command, we redirect it. In this case, we redirect it to find, and our criteria is IPv4, and it comes back. Now, we can also use things called, let me move up here a little bit. In some cases, we can use things called wildcards or regular expressions. We'll talk more about regular expressions in Linux later on in the course. But for now, I just want you to be able to associate wildcards with regular expressions. Now, regular expressions are much more powerful than wildcards, but it's the same kind of idea. So let's talk about what a wildcard is now. So a wildcard is just a character that represents other characters. So for example, a question mark represents any single character, and an asterisk or a star represents any number of any characters. So in this example that I want to show, if we ran the command dir, we could actually, let me deviate a little bit from this. So if we ran the command with a star here, that would mean give me anything that ends in .txt. And what we can see here is that there's 3 files that end in .txt. There could be other files that end in .doc, .exe, whatever, but we're specifying our search and limiting it to anything that ends in .txt. Now if we ran it with a, let's see, with the asterisk here, then this should return anything that starts with, well, let's again modify this a little bit just to make the point. So now we're going to find anything that starts with file1 and then a star and then ending in .txt. So in this case, what we're going to find out is we have 2 files that meet that criteria. And then if we used a question mark, we will find anything that starts with file and has 1 character and then the .txt. So in this case, we're expecting not to find this because there's 2 characters between file and .txt. So if I run that, sure enough, you'll see only files that have file and the question mark represents any character but only 1 character and then ending in .txt. So these are some techniques that you can use to refine your searches or your find commands. And again, right now we're just dealing with wildcards, and there's just a couple of wildcards that you can use. Later on, we're going to talk about regular expressions, which gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility and power. And I'm going to reserve that till later in the course, because right now we're just kind of at a beginner level. So later on we'll do a little bit more intermediate work using regular expressions, and you'll see all of various ways that we can really refine our search to be very specific in what we're looking for.